Well, welcome, bienvenue, annyeong haseyo, huanying, young citizens of the world, jeunes citoyens du monde. We have an absolute corker of an interview for you today. We are astounded to be interviewing world business leader and international diplomatic figure, Dominic Barton. Mr. Barton, otoke jinesayo nin hao hao damin. How are you today?
Ni hao, annyeonghaseyo. Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour. Welcome. And we are also grateful to be supported and joined today by our organization's co-founder and UBC alumni representative in South China, Dr. Albert Tam. Welcome, Dr. Tam. I believe you have a few words for us this morning.
So, dear educators and our young friends from around the world, good day to all of you. I'm Dr. Albert Tam, co-founder of the Young Citizens of the World. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this special event. On behalf of our organization, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to each of you for taking the time to join us for what promises to be an enlightening and inspiring session. Today, we have the distinct honor of exploring the themes of leadership, diplomacy, and the future of global economics with a very special guest, His Excellency Dominic Barton, former Canadian ambassador to China and a globally renowned leader in the fields of economics and diplomacy. Mr. Barton is a graduate of both the University of British Columbia, UBC, and Oxford University, and I had the privilege of meeting him through my role as Global Alumni Ambassador for UBC. Since then, I have witnessed firsthand his generosity in sharing his journey from his early life and upbringing to his remarkable career trajectory with young people across the globe. Throughout his career, Mr. Barton has not only achieved great success, but also exemplified the value of humility, openness, and dedication. His willingness to share his experience has made him a role model for many, particularly the younger generation. Today, we are incredibly fortunate to have Mr. Barton join us from London to share his insights and wisdom through our virtual platform. In this Zoom interview, Mr. Barton will answer questions from our young participants, and we look forward to hearing his thoughts on the pressing issues that captivate our future leaders. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand over the microphone to our Master of Ceremony, Mr. Chris Ford. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Tam. And so cherished, we next have, despite being very busy, fighting hard this week to keep grocery prices down for us, we're also joined by a member of Canada's upper chamber and longtime enthusiastic supporter of young citizens of the world, Senator Tony Lafreda. Welcome, Senator Lafreda, and I believe you also have a few opening remarks for our esteemed guests and listeners today. And of course, we want to hear every word that you're saying, so you'll have to unmute.
Yes, of course. Unmuted now. So first of all, good morning. Good morning to all. And our esteemed guests, good morning. We're privileged and honored to have you here with us this morning. I just want to deliver a message. I've been an advocate since the very beginning. And I think empowering our youth is one of the most critical investments we can make for the future. So thank you for being here this morning. And when we equip our youth, with the right tools, resources, and guidance, we unlock their potential to become tomorrow's leaders, innovators, and change makers. This is what the young global citizens of the world want to achieve. By fostering an environment of inclusivity, education, and opportunity, we give them the confidence to pursue their dreams and contribute meaningfully to society. And empowerment is about more than just providing skills. It's about instilling a sense of purpose, responsibility, meeting the right people in our environment, like this morning. And our youth, when empowered, can drive progress, strengthen communities, and create a brighter and more equitable world for all. And it is our duty to inspire them to believe in themselves and to support them every step of the way. This is why I am an advocate. I've been an advocate from the very beginning, and I thank our esteemed guests for being here this morning with us. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator Lafreda. So, cherished teachers and students, I would like to reinforce the magnitude of the interview unfolding before your eyes right now. When the government of Canada was having some diplomatic challenges with China, who did they turn to? Dominic Barton, and named him ambassador to China. When university graduates are looking for advice on the future world economy and what sort of jobs will be around, who do they turn to? If you answered Dominic Barton, you're playing this game well. And if you're a world mining giant like Rio Tinto or an environmentally social and governance focused company such as Leapfrog looking to jumpstart your operations, well, you know who to contact. It's our interviewee, Dominic Barton, from today. So what might we learn today from Mr. Barton's vast wealth of knowledge and experience? Could it be how to win awards on transformational change? Perhaps could it be the theory of moral sentiments from Adam Smith, the power of reverse mentorships, or the failings of the Anglo-Saxon short-term capitalism? Indeed, it is mind-boggling, all the things that we might learn during this next half hour. So thank you, Mr. Barton, for joining us today, and we are very much looking forward to sharing your knowledge with us this morning. And so, we begin at the very beginning, a very good place to start, Julie Andrews once sang. Mr. Barton, can you tell us about your career journey from a young age to becoming the global managing partner of McKinsey and Company and serving in many other roles today? What were some of the biggest challenges you faced along the way?
Well, thank you, Chris. I hope you can hear me okay. And thank you, Senator and Albert, for allowing me to be on your program. I think this is a terrific program, and I wish I could see all the students that are there. But I might start by saying I grew up in Chilliwack. I don't know if anyone there knows where that is, but it's in the Fraser Valley. And by coincidence, one of my very best friends from elementary school was visiting me from London this weekend. He's now a veterinarian in Chilliwack. But that was almost 55 years ago. It doesn't feel that long ago. But what I would just say is that I cherished growing up in a very small dairy farming community. That was that's where I grew up. And I guess what I would say is I've been someone who's always interested in kind of what's going on in the rest of the world and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with it, with many failures, if I might say, along the way. I first wanted to be an airline pilot because I thought that would be the way I could see the world. Then I wanted to be on a radio show, have my own talk show. And then as I went to UBC, as Albert said, which is a wonderful experience. I became very interested in economics and development economics. And then I went to Oxford, and there I was really interested in pursuing, again, working at the World Bank or the IMF. I applied for jobs there. I didn't even get a reply. It wasn't even, not even a rejection. I got nothing, zero. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do because I didn't want to be an academic, though I respect academics a lot. I wanted to be involved in the real world. And by fluke, McKinsey and Company came along. I'd never heard of them, never knew what they did. I found it odd what they did, that they would take young people to work on projects to help established companies perform better. And I thought that might be a good experience for 2 years, and then I would figure out what I wanted to do and go somewhere else. And I ended up, because I was Canadian, even though I was in the UK, they said, well, you need to, if you want to join us, you have to join in Toronto. So I did. And I ended up staying in McKinsey for 34 years. And the reason I stayed there is because it was a place I felt I was growing all the time. Every time you felt, you learned something, you were given another horizon to go through. It was very much a meritocracy. It wasn't about age, it was about ideas. He or she who had ideas didn't have to wait till you were some old dog like myself to be able to do stuff. You could make things happen early on, and I liked that. And and McKinsey's a very global firm. And so, after being in Canada for 8 years, I went to Australia. I worked with the government, and which I never knew McKinsey did, and learned a lot about, it was the tax system. It was to simplify the tax system with a guy named Paul Keating, who became the prime minister, a very, very effective, probably one of the most famous prime ministers in Australian history. But I learned a lot from him. All I needed was basically 3 dinners with him. But in 3 dinners, I learned more than I did in many of my university courses. And then I decided to go to Asia. I was in Korea, which I loved being in. It was in 1997 to 2003. It was right after the Asian financial crisis. And it was before Korea was popular. K-pop didn't exist. This is a country that was in serious difficulty, but has built some just amazing companies, amazing culture, amazing movies. So to live there and experience that was an incredible growth experience. And then I, after that, went to Shanghai for 6 years and led McKinsey's Asian practice for that period of time. And again, being in China in the period of very rapid growth was exhilarating. I've never learned so much as living in that place. And you had many corporations from around the world coming at that period because they wanted to be in China. It was very much in the boom time. Then I moved to Singapore for 2 years, then London. I became the global managing partner of McKinsey, which I did for 9 years. And I did that in London and New York. And then I stopped being in McKinsey basically in 2018. So that was a whole career, but there were many ups and downs in that career. It took me a long time to get elected a partner, one of the longest times. It was actually so embarrassing that my father-in-law sort of said, maybe business is not meant for you. You should do something else. And that my father-in-law is Arthur Labatt from the brewing company. He knows a lot about business, and it was kind of embarrassing not getting ahead, if you will. So there were many setbacks, but I think the setbacks are actually helpful in the long term because you learn how to deal with those issues. They're not fun. I can talk more about that if you'd like, but that was the piece. And then, so I won't go into that now, but I'm just saying it wasn't a smooth path. There was many ups and downs in that. But what I loved the most were the relationships with leaders. And when I was the managing partner of McKinsey, I had a rule, which was I had to meet with 2 CEOs or leaders. They could be government leaders, they could be university presidents every day that I was working. So over that 9-year period, I met 3,400 leaders. And that's people like the chairman of Samsung Electronics, the CEO of Nestle, people, P&G, you name the companies. And that was an amazing experience to learn from them about what they thought about leadership. What they would say to their 21-year-old self, their younger self. What would be the advice they'd give themselves? What would they do over again if they could do it again? So that was a very important learning experience for me. And then in 2018, I left McKinsey, I wanted to do something different. I was doing a whole range of different things. I was at Singapore Telecom. I was with the Wallenberg family in Sweden with Investor. I was a board member of the Malala Foundation. Just about probably too many things. And then, Chris, as you said, and Albert said, the government, it was really Ian Shugart, who was the cabinet secretary, asked if I would consider being the ambassador to China, which I actually didn't think I should do because I don't have any qualifications. But I think it was really about relationships. And frankly, the situation was so bad, there probably wasn't many people in the line to want to do it. But I was very nervous. I didn't know if I should do it. I thought the failure risk was very high. But I also thought if your country asks you to do something and you say no, I don't think I could have lived with myself when I'm at the end of my life looking. So it was, I've got to do this and go in 100%. And that experience of about 3 years was an amazing experience. We can talk more about that. But I learned and grew phenomenally from that. I learned way more in that period than I had in many of my years in McKinsey. And then since when we finished our mission, which was to get the two Michaels back and Meng Wanzhou back in China, and at least our trade relationship back on track and communications, I said I wanted to finish and I wanted to go back to the private sector. And I decided, I'll shut up here because I'm talking for too long. I basically said that I wanted to work on issues that matter to me the most. One is the energy transition or climate transition. And that's why I picked Rio Tinto, because they are supplying the materials for the energy transition, the copper, the aluminum, the iron ore, and the lithium. And then I also wanted to work on development economics. Leapfrog is a private equity firm focused on serving people with less than $11 a day in Africa, Southeast Asia, and India. And I work with Radical Ventures, which is an AI firm because I'm interested in technology, based out of Toronto. Probably it's the leading AI investment firm from a performance point of view. I, of course, know nothing about AI, so they don't let me do the investments, but I'm a partner and I help them with the growth of those companies. And then finally, I work with the Eurasia Group, which is a geopolitical advisory firm. So to keep sort of my knife sharp, if you will, in terms of what's happening. So that's my life. I'm based out of London. I'm in Canada once a month in different parts of the country. But I travel also to Africa, Australia, China, Southeast Asia. So I'll shut up. Sorry, Chris, for talking for so long.
No worries. I am super pleased that you've outlined some of the fantastic and fascinating career paths that our students might go down. And you're talking about advice you got from CEOs about how to advise 21. Well, here we're advising the 12 and 13-year-olds. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, question 2 is coming to us from only 58 minutes up the Trans-Canada Highway, away from where a young Dominic Barton was being inspired by his teacher, Miss Stubson, at Sardis Secondary School, to take on the world. Nearby, Clive Hia and his student, Michaela, at Cloverdale Catholic School in Surrey, BC, have question number 2.
Hi, my name is Michaela, and I'm a member of the SLT. In various positions of leadership in several global organizations, what strategies did you find most effective in managing a diverse and international team?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is it's very important to understand the cultural context. I mean, cultures matter. As you well know, there's a big difference between Korean culture, Japanese culture, Chinese culture. Sometimes in Canada, I felt Asia was a group, but they're different. It's different, right? In terms of how decisions get made, how blunt people are. So understanding that context is important. But the second thing I think is just to be you. Don't try and game anything. Just be yourself. And if you don't understand something, say it. Be direct about what you want to do. Listen more than you talk. especially in the early part of it, to sort of get the lay of the land. But I think it's important you just to really understand the context and then to be yourself and listen. And that's how you build trust, which ultimately is what matters in being able to get things done. Do people trust you? And if they do, a lot of very good things can happen.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And for question 3, we'll be boogieing 1 hour down the 401 from Mr. Barton's old McKinsey and Company office in downtown Toronto to David Bouchard Public School in Oshawa, Ontario. There we will find Ms. Cavern Lopez's and her wonderful grade 8 class.
Hi, I'm Maya, and I go to David Bouchard Public School in Oshawa, Ontario. And my question is, what are some of the most significant experiences you had as a Canadian ambassador to China, and how did they influence your perspective on international relations?
Yeah, there's so many things I learned from that. It's going to be hard to pin it down, but I think one is that again, I think it's very important to understand the different context. And in China, one of the most critical things is what's the decision-making approach of what goes on, because often what looks like the approach may not be the approach. It's quite opaque. And it's not just opaque for foreigners, it's opaque for people in the market. So it's really trying to understand how things work it's critical. As I mentioned that on the cultural part of it, that's that part. I think the second is in diplomacy, you often you're trying to see if you can merge many different people's interests, right? It can't just, if you just go in with your own agenda, the chances are it's not going to move very far. You need to understand how your agenda fits with others. And what I sort of think about is a Venn diagram. So when I was in China, I was thinking about, we had a big problem. China had its interests. That was one circle. We had the United States, which had its own interests. And we had Canada. So I can't do it with my fingers, but you had 3 sort of rings, right, with different sets of interests and red lines. There was a 4th, which was Huawei. And no one really knew how linked Huawei was with the government or not. So there were really 4 circles that you had to look for an overlap and say, that's how we're going to navigate a pathway to get a solution that's going to work for everyone in through it. So you really try to think about where other people are in terms of your context and then move to get a solution on that. And then it's really, I come back to this trust point. You have to build trust quickly. And I spent a lot of time going back and forth between China and the United States. That was very unusual for a Canadian ambassador to China to be spending so much time in Washington. But that's because I was trying to build a bridge between those two groups. I spent a lot of time with the Huawei people, and obviously spent a lot of time in Ottawa. So you're trying to figure out how to navigate a pathway and trust so that people believe that you can actually drive things. And then the final point I'd just say is it's risk-taking, because often when you're creating a developing solution, it may not have been done before. And when it's not been done before, people get afraid. And I to be very open, in government, sometimes people are more risk averse. They're nervous about, should you really do this? Is this right? And my view is you have to push it. And that can be tiring or exhausting as you go through that. But it's important to be able to drive things forward. So those are the elements, again, about the context, the understanding, the framing of where people are in the pathway, building trust, trying to ensure that you can then make a move, which people may be afraid of. And by the way, it didn't work a few times. It was not a straight line. We had some big setbacks. We got very close in December of 2020, and then it last minute during the election process in the US, things collapsed, then we have to go back and move it forward. So resilience also matters because it's easy to give up, and you just have to keep driving. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I'll shut up there. I'm going to close my door because I've got little kids running around it. They may come in here and disrupt things. So just give me 1 second.
Thank you for answering my question.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for the answer. And now we're going to be bringing it on home for our concluding question. We'll be running back to Saskatoon, as Burton Cummings would say, to get Mr. Barton's take on something as insignificant as the future of the global economy. And I have my student with me, Joe, who's going to ask question number 4.
Hi. Question number 4. In your opinion, what are the key trends and challenges that shape our global economy in the next decade? And how can young people prepare for these changes?
Well, I think as the senator said, your leadership is going to be required. We need to unleash you to lead because you're going to be leading in some of what I think are the most exciting or disruptive times in history. And there are 4 forces that I think about all the time, which are very disruptive. And again, I'm an optimist. I'm not negative. I'm an optimist. I'm a frightened optimist. But those 4 forces, in my view, are the following. The first is that we are in the middle of this climate transition, the energy transition. We're moving from, we're going to need, in my view, fossil fuels for quite a long time, but we have to also have renewables as we go through it. And that is going to be leading to one of the largest and most significant capital investments in human history to be able to do that, to make that transition while the world is growing. So we have a climate transition. The second thing, a force that's out there, is a technology force and transition. We're at the early stages of an amazing technology transformation. AI is a big part of that, but there are others as well. Nanotechnology, nuclear fusion, which could be coming down the pipe. There is a whole series of these, but those changes are going to be profound and they're coming quickly. And I think we're going to see even more changes in the next 3 years than we've seen in the last 25 years on technology. And so what you're being taught, how we think about education, is going to become very important. But technology is a huge force that is there. The third is a economic transition, and this transition is towards Asia. Half the world's population is in Asia. And the weighting of the world from a GDP point of view, the economic weight of the world is now in that region. And that's why I think it's important that all of us have to raise our Asia competence and awareness, as Albert Tam has been pushing me and others to do for decades. But this economic shift is very important because the largest middle class in the world will be in Asia. And Canada, which is an amazing country, it's a wonderful country, we need to be connected to that part of the world or we're not going to thrive. The United States is absolutely critical, but we also have to think about these linkages that are there. And some Chinese cities, Indian cities, and Southeast Asian cities are twice the size of Canada, just a city. So we need to understand that and be there. And that's affecting geopolitics, right? We have the rise of China. We have a China-US tension, which is causing all sorts of challenge and disruption in the world. We have the Russia-Ukraine war that's going on, tensions in the Middle East. There's a lot of geopolitical shifts. We've moved from a unipolar world where it was primarily the United States after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 to a more multipolar world. So that's a third force. And then the fourth force is what I call income inequality. There's a big split now between the rich and the poor. The rich rich people are getting richer and poor people are getting poorer. And that's causing a lot of tension in every single country on Earth, including North Korea, China, the United States, Germany, London. And that's creating social tension. So those four big forces are creating very big disruptions. That means that the speed of the world is going faster. That means that there's going to be more exciting new businesses that we can't even imagine being created, that we need to be thinking about. It also means that there's going to be more risk and challenges, and we're going to have to think differently as leaders to bring all of that together. And the thing is, all of you, I look to, you're going to be, well, I'm going to be sitting on a rocking chair, retired, hopefully with my remaining teeth in my mouth, hoping that you will have actually helped get the world into a better place than we've left it, because it's going to be very disruptive and it's going to need leadership, really strong leadership that I think Canada is so well positioned to lead in, because we're significant enough with our values and our multiculturalism to be respected, and yet we're insignificant enough that people aren't afraid of us. They're not worried. And that's a very good position. So I hope you will step up and help lead through all of this turbulence, positive and negative.
Thanks for answering the question.
Wonderful. Well, we've come to the half-hour mark. You had mentioned possibly having a few minutes for open questions. Do you actually have the time for that today?
100%.
So I know I've got one from, or two maybe from Joe again. Did you want to hit him up with one of the ones you suggested?
So, you've traveled a lot, and my question is, where's your favorite place to visit or live in?
It's a really good question. It's a hard one because I've loved all of the places. Probably my favorite city to visit is Buenos Aires in Argentina. It's an amazing city, incredible place just a bit. So I find that a very inspiring place. Probably the place I enjoyed the most in living was Seoul. It's a very dynamic, creative, lots of the culture, the businesses. It's a place that's right on the, you've got the North Korean border just 40 miles north. So it's quite so I like that, but it's a hard question because I love Shanghai. I love Vancouver. There's many places, but those would be the ones I'd pick.
I saw you had a video on how you liked visiting Buenos Aires.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you had a video on it about you did a marathon there or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I tried to do marathons in all of the kind of key cities I liked. So I did 6, but then I kind of ran out of gas. I've got to get back into it.
Dominic, Mr. Barton, I wanted to thank you. Very inspiring and insightful. I didn't talk much about you because I know Mr. Tam would do so, and our moderators always do so. So I wanted to discuss how important it was for our youth to empower them and push them forward. So thank you for being here. But I have one question, and we hear a lot today with the American politics, and Canada is so closely linked to the U.S. As you know, our GDP is 84% import and export, and 45% export to the export and 3/4 to the U.S. So, we're so closely linked. And we hear a lot how, America's broken and how our institutions are broken. And how does the quality of life in Canada compare to quality of life around the world? Do you still have confidence in North America, per se, in our institutions, in our way of life, in our democracy? We hear a lot about how the U.S. election will be contested one way or another. How do you see all that? It's important for our students to know. We really... Because trust, you've talked about trust, and I believe trust is the currency of every relationship. And if we cannot trust our institutions, if we cannot trust our democracy, our elections, well, then there's not much we can trust. And we just had a Victoria Forum where I had the privilege of, exchanging with Mr. Clark, the Honorable Mr. Clark, and the Honorable Lloyd Axworthy, Manley, and we talked about trust. Trust was the front center and of the theme, because it's so important. Trust is so important. What are your impressions on that?
Well, I think in Canada in particular, we're very fortunate because I think there is a lot of trust. I always, when I was in China, in Beijing, with the deputy head of mission is a guy named Jim Nickel, who's now in Taiwan, and he used to always, remind me that Canadians are reasonable people. Like we're reasonable, we're measured, we're calm, we're not extreme. And I think that's so important, and I think it's distinctive, and I think that's why Canadians are liked so much. We don't get in people's faces. We respect where people are, but we stand up for what we believe in, and I think that's important. But we shouldn't take it for granted. Maybe to your point, Senator. I mean, I worry that it's not just naturally going to happen, and I think I do worry about the polarizing politics and how that it's corrosive to trust, because it becomes you just look at someone and say that person's a 1 or a 0. You don't understand the complexity of that individual. It's become very black and white, if I might say, and I think that's not how reality is. People are more complicated. That said, in the U.S. probably is. I worry about that. I worry about the election that's coming up and the stability and so forth. But I'm as I said, a frightened optimist, because the one thing that you can't take away from the United States, no matter how crazy the politics may seem and so forth, it is the most innovative place on earth. There is nowhere that gets close to the kind of the innovation that goes on and creating new businesses and people having the ambition to do things. My worry is holding it together for the trust point you raised. And I think if different peoples are not spending time together to understand we actually have more in common than we have different, then you're going to get the polarization, which could lead to breakdown. I think we have to work hard on community and how we interact with each other and do things. There's a book, one of my favorite books that I read is called Bowling Alone. It's by a Harvard professor, and he basically was writing about how, in that case, American society was becoming less cohesive. People don't know their neighbors as much as they did. There used to be bowling leagues in the 1960s, believe it or not. I'm not a big bowler, but apparently that was a thing, right? And community, you knew your neighbor, right? You're seeing more and more we don't know our neighbors. We don't have common forums to go to. There's less religion or church, but not everyone's going, so these bonding or kind of understanding how different people live forums are going away. And we need to think about ways to do that. And social media, which, by the way, I don't want to demonize social media, because there's many very good aspects to social media, but one of the negative consequences is it can silo us. We can just focus on listening to people that we like, as opposed to hearing other voices. So I guess, Senator, I think Canada and the United States have amazing values for the democracy, as you've said, this innovation, freedom, which we should never, ever, ever take for granted. And yet at the same time, these forces that I was talking about are beginning to rip at those things. And if we don't invest in that, we could end up in not a very good place.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was so well said. And I think our democracy, we should never take it for granted, right? It should never be an aberration. And then on the U.S., yes, the largest companies, American companies, are in technology, whereas you look to Europe and the largest companies are in food, fashion, manufacturing, automobile. In the U.S., they're in technology. The future is in technology. So I agree that just so innovative and creative, and 45% of our GDP is export, 3/4 to the U.S. So we're closely linked, and when they cough, we catch a cold, like they say, right? So we
Yeah.
got to be careful on everything that's going on. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think I need to help you or have you guys help me. I'm trying to develop local town halls involving all parties and to try and develop that trust and decision making and belief in one another. So maybe that's a project we can get going. I'd love to hear many more stories, many more things. I know you've spoken out about education and how we could make that better, but we're at the end of our time together. And I would say sadly, but it's been, I'm so grateful for this opportunity and that you accepted our invitation to join us today and help make a positive impact on the next generation. Miss Stubbson would be very proud of you.
Thank you.
So, Barton Xiansheng, do you have any final words for our young citizens of the world?
No, please be ambitious. You can do anything you want. There's nothing you can't do. And I please, like, again, Carol Stubbson, my teacher, is the one that unlocked me in actually in grade 8. So go for it. Please go for it. And I look forward to reading about you. And thank you so much for having me on your program. It's very energizing and inspiring to me.
Well, thank you, Dominic Barton. Merci beaucoup. Kamsahamnida. Xie Nien. And now we invite our schools to unmute and also say thank you and goodbye to our guest today.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Barton.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.